watches her every night. I never thought twice about the ceiling light in our upstairs hallway. It's just a simple, outdated fixture with a yellowish bulb that buzzed faintly when it was on. But lately, it's the only thing that warns me he's there. Without that dingy glow reflecting off the walls, I might not see the subtle shape at the top of the stairs, the silent watcher who appears each night. My sister's bedroom and mine face each other on opposite sides of a short hallway. She's never liked sleeping with her door closed, says she gets stuffy and claustrophobic. On most nights, her door is open, revealing her desk, a pile of clean clothes on the floor, and the edge of her bed. Under normal circumstances, that's all it would be, a casual nightly sight, her dozing off with her light turned off. But now it's become a window to something else. The first time I saw him, it was a few weeks ago. I was scrolling through my phone in bed, eyes heavy, the hallway only partially lit by that single overhead fixture at the top of the stairs. My sister's room was dark. Her breathing faintly seeped into the hallway as she slept. I was under my blankets and happened to glance up at the reflection in that light. Sometimes, if the angle's just right, I can see the shadows behind me. That night, I noticed an odd shape near her bedroom doorway, a tall, lean figure standing frozen in the middle of the hallway. My first thought was that I was imagining it, seeing my own silhouette warped by the poor lighting. But no. The outline was definitely not me. Mine would be short or shaped differently. This figure had broad shoulders and stood about half a head taller than I am. It lingered just past the threshold of her room, as if staring right at her, watching her. Not once did it waver or show signs of normal movement, no shifting weight, no breathing, nothing. Only a silent, rigid presence. Fear took over, making my throat tighten. I tried to turn my head, but a wave of dread made me freeze in place. My mind whirled, could Dad be awake? But why would he stand there, in the dark, watching her sleep? It didn't make sense. My heart pounded. After a few panicked moments, I forced myself to turn on my bedside lamp. The hallway brightened instantly, but when I turned to look, the figure was gone. The only sound was the faint buzz of the overhead bulb, like it was taunting me. The next morning, I told my sister about the shape, the man. She shrugged it off. She assumed I'd had a nightmare and teased me for reading too many horror stories online. Our parents were equally dismissive. Mom said maybe I saw the shadow of a coat rack or some weird reflection. Dad insisted no one was awake that late and all of the doors were locked. I wanted to let it go, be measured, but deep down I felt that rolling tension, the memory of how real that shape seemed. That second night, I kept my bedroom light off, determined to see if it would happen again. Sure enough, right around midnight, I noticed it in the reflection on the overhead fixture, the same tall figure again outside her open door, just watching. My skin prickled as if I'd walked into a freezer. He was so still that I wondered if it might be a life-size cutout. But even cutouts shift a little in changing light, and this figure seemed to absorb darkness. I sensed a watchfulness, a concentrated presence like it was listening to her every breath. What did he want? I wanted to call out to him, to break the spell, but fear clamped my lungs. All I managed was a faint whispered hello. At that moment, I saw the overhead light flicker, and the figure was no longer visible in the reflection. I sat there for a solid 5 minutes, adrenaline pumping, barely breathing, expecting him to step forward, but the hallway stayed still. Eventually, exhausted, I drifted to sleep, though every tiny creak of the house startled me awake. By the third night, my nerves were shot. I was so tired. I tried to keep an eye on her doorway from my own bed, but I eventually dozed off again. A sudden sense of being watched startled me awake. My phone, half charged, laying on my chest. I tapped the screen to check the time, 3:12 a.m. My gaze went to the overhead light. He was there again, ink black in the reflection. It was becoming a cruel routine, He'd appear, stand perfectly still, and vanish at the slightest movement or change of light. My whole body shook with anxiety. Heat pounded. I could barely breathe, but I couldn't just hide. I needed proof, or I needed to do something. I crept out of bed, ever so slowly, crossing the short distance from my bed to my door as silently as I could. Each step made the floorboards groan under the carpet. My sister's soft breathing was steady, oblivious to the danger I sensed. Tiptoeing to my sister's door, I slowly raised my phone. The darkness pressed in around me. The overhead fixture cast a weak glow and dimmed at half-light. I saw movement. It felt like an electric charge swirled around me. The hair on my arms and the back of my neck stood straight up. My phone's camera was open, but it wouldn't focus. Before I could snap a photo, I felt something brush past my shoulder like the air itself moved around me. My sister jolted awake, letting out a gasp. I tumbled into her room, almost dropping my phone. Inside, everything looked normal. Piles of books and clothes, her bed with rumpled blankets. My sister blinked drowsily. "What are you doing?" she mumbled, rubbing her eyes. I tried to force a calm tone, lying that I thought I heard footsteps, maybe Dad checking on us. She muttered something about weird dreams and laid back down, drifting off again. I left her door as it was, though part of me wanted to slam it shut for the rest of the night. I retreated back to my bed, wide-eyed pulse racing like I just sprinted a mile. I didn't sleep until dawn streaked the sky. If he returned, I didn't see him, but my nerves twanged with leftover adrenaline until morning. Over the following week, the pattern repeated. I'd sense him around midnight, see that tall silhouette in the overhead light's reflection, and freeze. Sometimes he'd linger there for minutes, sometimes only seconds before disappearing as though he'd never existed. Each time, a knot of dread coiled tighter in my stomach. Yet no matter how many times I leaped out of bed, flicked on a light, or shone my flashlight, I could never catch him in the act. He left no footprints, no evidence but my shaky recollection and the cold sweat on my neck. I still had no proof for them to believe me. My sister seemed oblivious, going about her day with her normal routine of streaming shows and texting friends. A few times, I considered demanding she sleep with her door closed. But how could I explain why without sounding insane? There's a shadow man watching you in the reflection of the hallway light every night. I barely believed my own words, so I said nothing. One evening, I mustered the courage to talk to Dad and asked if he ever paced the hallway at night. He looked concerned and said no. Maybe I was anxious about upcoming tests or spooking myself with too much true crime. I didn't press it. I knew I was alone with this. Over time, the dread evolved into something heavier. Every time I saw the silhouette, it seemed a tiny bit closer to her doorway, like he was edging forward day by day. That's what terrified me the most. I became convinced that if one night, if I didn't keep watch, if I fell asleep, or was gone for the night, he might take a single step into her room. What would happen then? Would she be missing in the morning, replaced by an empty bed? Or worse, her lying there, pale and unresponsive? My imagination fed on the unknown, conjuring horrors I didn't dare speak aloud. So each night I sat up, phone in hand, forcing my eyes to remain open. The reflection in that old light fixture became my lifeline. As long as I could see him standing in the hallway, just out of reach, I told myself my sister was safe. He wouldn't dare cross into the room while I watched. The big question loomed. Why hadn't I told her? Was I protecting her by staying silent, or just giving myself an excuse not to face the possibility that we were dealing with something beyond reason? On the worst nights, I'd drift off for a moment, then snap awake in terror. My heart would flutter as I checked the overhead glow for his shape. Sometimes I found him instantly, as if he'd never left. Other nights, the hallway would be empty, leaving me with the dread that maybe he'd finally gone inside. I'd rush to her room, half crazed, only to find her safe, every time. The sense that he's waiting never goes away. I can't shake the feeling that each nightly visit is building to something final, something irreversible. And so, I keep my vigil. I stare down that reflection, gripping my blankets, forcing myself to stay alert while the rest of the house sleeps. I have no plan if he actually steps forward or if he appears at my door instead. The idea of confronting him feels impossible. All I can do is cling to this uneasy stalemate. As long as I watch him from my bed, he won't move. I know deep down that I can't keep my eyes open forever. One night, fatigue will get the better of me or I'll step away for a moment. And I can't begin to describe the fear of imagining what he'll do if I'm not there, if he's free to advance those last few feet into her room. Until then, I remain here, propped up against my pillows, phone battery draining into the early hours. In the hallway, the glow of that old light flickers, and sometimes in its reflection, I see him shift slightly, like a predator testing boundaries. Always there, always watching. And if I fail to watch back, if I lose track of him for even a second, my fear tells me exactly what might happen next. And that's the thought that truly keeps me awake. I don't know if it's too late to get a divorce now. It's tearing me apart, and it all goes back to a dream I had 15 years ago. It started out warm, cozy even. My buddy Dave rolled up to my place with his daughter tagging along. We were out back, having a barbecue, smoke curling up into the dusk. She was maybe 5, sharp as a tack, rattling off random facts, especially ghost stories. Didn't seem weird. Dave's always been hooked on creepy stuff, probably had some old books she dug into. I didn't overthink it, dream logic, you know? We're chatting, laughing about something random when it slams me, Dave's got no kid. He's not even hitched. I jolted awake, sheets twisted around me, a bit shaken but brushing it off. Dreams mess with your head all the time. I sleep with a blanket pulled over my face. Lying there, heart still racing, I heard it, a low, guttural rumble seeping through the covers, like a growl stretched thin. Then words, don't go. Let's keep talking. Crystal clear in that little girl's voice from the dream, but warped, deep, wrong. My pulse hammered. I was awake, no doubt, but my eyes stayed glued shut. It was too sharp, too near, like she was in the room with me. Flip on the light, pull the blanket back, it'd stop, right? Except I couldn't move. I just clenched my jaw, begged sleep to take me back. It did, eventually. No more dreams that night, or none I can recall. Figured that was that. Months later, Dave got married. A few more, and they had a baby girl. For a flicker, that dream popped up, but I chalked it to chance. Life rolled on. 10 years ago, 5 years after the dream, Dave threw a family hangout at his place. Friends, kids everywhere. I'm in his study, thumbing through his stash of spooky books, when his daughter strolls in. She's 5 now, same age as the dream kid, and starts yapping ghost stories, odd facts, word for word what I dreamed. I'd blanked on that night by then, just marveled at how bright she was. Dinner's almost ready, so I say, hey, let's go eat. She tilts her head. Don't go. Let's keep talking. Don't go. Let's keep talking. It hits like a punch. That line, I knew it. Then her voice drops, and it's that exact same growl from the dream, low, jagged, not a kid's at all. Don't go. Let's keep talking. The dream crashes back, every bit of it, and I'm gone, bolting to my car, hands shaking. She remembered me from before she existed. Dave called me later that night, asking what the hell was wrong. I mumbled something about feeling sick, hung up quick. For a couple weeks after, we still talked, short, awkward calls. But every time he'd casually bring her up, like, oh, she's into this book now. That voice, the same damn voice from the dream, would rip through my head. Low, guttural, wrong, like it was whispering right next to me. I couldn't take it. I stopped picking up, stopped replying. Eventually, he quit trying, and I cut him out completely. It didn't stop there, though. Even after Dave was gone from my life, that voice stuck around. I'd wake up at night, heart pounding, sure I'd heard it again, low and close, like it was waiting for me to slip. I started therapy, got meds to knock me out cold. Waking up scared the hell out of me. Waking up meant risking it again. The pills helped after a while. I could sleep without jolting awake. Dave faded out, and I thought maybe it was over. 5 years back, I got married. My wife's a hobby writer, short stories for mags, small stuff. We'd kick ideas around sometimes. One night, I spot her drafting something. A guy dreams of his friend's non-existent daughter chatting him up. Wakes up, friend's got no kid. Then the friend weds, has a daughter. I couldn't finish reading. I'd never told her, told no one. No chance I'd spilled it sleeping. I'd locked that mess away years ago. My chest seized, dread choking me. Who'd listen? Shrinks? They'd cage me. I stumbled outside, gulping air before she saw. She caught me at the door. Don't go, she said. Let's keep talking. At first, it was her normal voice, soft, familiar. Then it shifted, and it was that voice, the exact same one from the dream, from Dave's kid, deep, guttural, like something hollowed out, don't go. Let's keep talking. I bolted. Drove to the first motel I hit, checked in, barely closed my eyes. Phone kept buzzing. Her calls, texts. Ignored them. Sat there, reeling. Pulled up her pic on my phone. That face I knew, it blurred, turned strange. Who's been sleeping beside me? Searched her name online, dozens of shots, her smile, her eyes. Then an old one, fuzzy, from when she was 5. That face, the dream girl, Dave's daughter. I gagged, stomach churning. Called Dave, first time in 10 years. I ditched that crew before the wedding, didn't even invite them. Busy signal, dead end. Checked his socials instead. Last post 5 years ago, right before I tied the knot, family trip to some Pacific island. Photos up, but his daughter's face, it's a void, a black smear swallowing her head. Phone buzzed. Her text, let's keep talking. Just that. Room went ice. Cold, not just cool, dead frigid. A slow scrape started at the door, heavy, like claws dragging. Then that voice, the same voice, hers now from the dream, from the kid, low, oozing through the walls, don't go. Let's keep talking. Not from my phone, right outside. I jammed the deadbolt, shoved the dresser against it, but the scraping kept coming. It's still coming. I don't know what she is, or what's out there. I don't know how that voice knew me before she was born, or why it's coming out of my wife's mouth now. All I know is it's here, and I can't outrun it much longer. I'm typing this from the cab of my beat-up F-150, parked in a McDonald's lot off I-90 in Chicago. The motor's idling to keep the heat on, a low rumble vibrating the cracked vinyl seats. My right arm's wrapped in a greasy rag from the glove box. For claw marks, deep enough to scrape bone, ooze red down my sleeve and sting like hell every time I flex. The blood soaked through, dripping slowly onto my jeans, pooling in the creases of the fabric. My hands shake and smear crimson across the laptop keys. It's 3 a.m. and I can still hear it. That wet snarl echoes in my skull like it's carved there, a loop I can't shake. I clean up after Vanguard Extermination's hunters. Tonight was my first job. I don't know what I've got myself into. If you've worked for them or seen what they hunt, tell me what's coming. I'm not sure I'll make it to the next gig. I started with Vanguard 2 weeks ago. It's a cash gig with no resume needed, just a phone call that came out of nowhere last Tuesday. A voice, clipped and gravelly, asked, "Can you handle a mess?" I said, yeah. I used to mop floors at a slaughterhouse in Gary, Indiana. Blood, shit, and gristle sliding under my boots for $8 an hour. So I figured I could stomach whatever they threw at me. They didn't ask for references or ID, just dropped $1,000 in my account through some encrypted app and told me to wait for a text. I spent the next few days pacing my one-room apartment, the walls yellowed from years of cigarette smoke, the radiator clanking like a dying engine. Tonight, 8 p.m., the text buzzed my cracked Nokia, Warehouse 2300S, Halstead, Shredder Cleanup. Hunter's done. Bring bleach. I grabbed my kit from the closet, a mop with a splintered handle, 2 dented steel buckets, rubber gloves stiff from old grease, and a crowbar, rusted but heavy for prying guts off concrete. I drove over in the dark, windshield fogging from my breath, tires crunching snow in the empty lot. The warehouse loomed against the sodium-lit sky, a hulking shell of crumbling brick and smashed windows, jagged glass teeth glinting in the cold. The air hit me as I stepped out, sharp, 15 degrees, stinking of rust and something sour like meat left to rot in a dumpster. A Vanguard van sat out front, black with no plates, doors ajar, engine cold. No hunters in sight, just tire tracks cutting through the slush, fading into the night. I assumed done meant done, so I hauled my gear inside, buckets clanking against my thighs, the crowbar swinging loose in my grip. The steel door creaked open, hinges groaning, and I stepped into a slaughter pen. The floor was cracked concrete, slick with red, running ankle-deep in blood that lapped at my boots, thick and clotting slow. Claw marks gouged the surface, 6 inches deep, ragged like a machine had raged through, stretching wall to wall in a frenzy of slashes. The walls sprayed crimson, streaked with handprints, or claw prints, smearing down to the floor, where chunks of flesh stuck wet and glistened under my flashlight's beam, dripping slowly onto the concrete with a soft plop-plop. A hunter's boot sat by a splintered crate, laces frayed, toe gnawed down to shredded rubber, blood pooling warm around the sole. I gagged, the bile rising sharp in my throat, and pulled on my mask, rubber cracked from those slaughterhouse days, the straps biting into my scalp. I started scrubbing, bleach sloshing from the bucket, the sharp fumes burning my nose and mixing with the ruts, think until my eyes watered. The air buzzed, thick and heavy, like flies should have been swarming but weren't. Just an eerie silence broken by the drip-drip of gore from a busted pipe overhead, rust flakes floating down like ash. I worked slow, mop dragging through the blood, soaking red before the bleach could cut it. The claw marks caught my eye, too fresh, edges glistening like they'd been carved minutes ago. I found teeth scattered near a steel beam, yellow, jagged, wolf-sized, some snapped at the root, others whole and sharp enough to slice skin. The beam was bent, twisted like taffy, and I pried the teeth out with the crowbar, metal screeching loud enough to echo through the cavernous space. My hands grew slick with sweat inside the gloves, the rubber sticking to my palms, and I wiped my brow, leaving a shriek of grime across my forehead. Every scrape of the mop, every clank of the bucket, felt too loud, like I was waking something I shouldn't. That's when I saw him. The last hunter slumped in the corner, face down in a puddle of his own guts. His chest was caved, ribs snapped outward like broken twigs, lungs shredded into pink tatters, blood bubbling slowly around the edges as if he'd just stopped breathing. One arm dangled, claw torn from shoulder to wrist, muscle peeled back in strips, the other clutched a machete, blade chipped, coated black with something thicker than blood, viscous and tar-like. His eyes were gone, gouged out clean, sockets dripping red jelly that trickled down his cheeks, pooling with the blood below. His jaw hung loose, unhinged at one side, tongue lolling out, purple and swollen. I froze, mop slipping from my grip, to splash bleach across the floor, the white foam fizzing pink where it hit the gore. He twitched, fingers curling, slow and deliberate, a rasp gurgling up from his throat. It's not dead. My gut dropped hard. Vanguard said done, and hunters don't lie, or so I thought. His head jerked up, blind socket staring straight at me, and the voice rasped again, wetter, not his own. Clean me again. I stumbled back, boots slipping on the slick concrete, my flashlight clattering against a crate and spinning wild, shadows dancing across the blood-streaked walls. The claw marks moved, concrete cracking, shifting slow, like something scratched from underneath, a low rumble vibrating up through my soles. A snarl rolled through the warehouse, deep, guttural, shaking the floor so hard the buckets tipped, bleach spilling in waves. The puddle under the hunter rippled, blood bubbling fast, frothing red at the edges. I grabbed the crowbar cold and heavy in my hands and swung it at the air, heart slamming against my ribs, breath ragged in my mask. The wall exploded, bricks blasting inward, pelting my legs with sharp chunks, dust choking my lungs until I coughed blood-flecked spit. It was the shredder, 10 feet tall, gray fur matted with black blood, claws like butcher knives dripping red onto the floor. Its jaw unhinged, teeth a jagged mess of yellow and cracked enamel, saliva stringing thick between them. Eyes glowed, piss yellow, pupils slitted, locked on me like I was meat. Vengad lit. It wasn't dead, just pissed and starving. The hunter's corpse lurched up, puppeted, guts trailing in wet loops, and swung the machete, blade slashing an inch from my throat, the air hissing as it passed. I ducked, crowbar cracking his skull, bone splintering with a wet crunch, brain splashing gray and red across my boots, but the shredder roared and lunged, claws raking my arm. Skin tore open, muscle split wide, blood jetted hot down my side, soaking my shirt in seconds. I fell, bleach bucket tipping fully, the flood washing over my knees, fumes stinging my eyes until I blinked tears. It swiped again, missed my chest, gouged the floor instead, sparks flying as concrete shattered. Sirens wailed outside, red and blue flashing through the broken windows. 3 cops burst in, Glocks popping loud, brass shells clinking on the bloody floor. Bullets sank into its hide, useless, black ooze leaking slow from the holes, pooling thick. It turned fast as a whip. First cop's chest burst open, ribs snapping like dry wood, guts hosing the crates in a crimson arc. Second's head bit clean off, teeth crunching through bone, blood arcing high to splatter the ceiling. Third screamed, claw punching through his gut, intestines spilling out in a wet tangle, legs kicking wildly as it lifted him, shook him like a rag doll, and dropped him pulp, a heap of meat and uniform. I scrambled. Boots slipped, crowbar swinging, hit its leg. Iron sank, ooze spurted, but it laughed, a wet snarl rattling my skull, and lunged. Teeth grazed my shoulder, spit burning like acid. Headlights flashed. The Vanguard van screeched in, hunters piling out, rifles blazing. Cracks loud as thunder, rounds tore fur, flesh flying. It roared, claw slashing, caught a hunter's arm and tore it free, bones snapping, blood raining. Another's gut opened, intestines looping out and steaming in the cold. I dove behind a crate. Splinters cut my palms, bleach soaked my jeans. They pinned it, rifles popping, a net gun firing. Steel cords tangled its claws and pinned it, thrashing. One hunter, big and scarred, jammed a harpoon in its throat. Black blood gushed and soaked him. It slumped, concrete cracking under its weight, yellow eyes dimming slow. They didn't look at me. They just dragged it to the van, chains clanking and blood trailing, and peeled out, tires squealing. I limped up, arm throbbing and shirt red, and mopped what I could. Guts sloshed, claw marks still wet. I grabbed the hunter's machete, chipped and heavy for proof. Cops lay shredded, chests hollow, heads gone, guts strewn like confetti. That voice stuck. Clean me again, looping soft and wet in my head. Nose trickling blood I didn't feel. I'm here now, parked ragtight around my arm. 4 gashes deep, black at the edges, sting worse every minute. Vanguard texted, next job Monday. Keep quiet, with another grand in my account. I hear it, snarling, faint, under the engine's hum. First night's a bitch. What's Vanguard hunting? What's his voice? Tell me. I'm not sure I can scrub this clean, but they better pay for my medical bills.